last night, when I attended that excellent discussion and enjoyed it thoroughly, at some point towards the end of that, somebody in the audience asked you whether there's insufficient attention to human rights and the ethic of justice. And then you responded to that, I thought very, very interestingly and well. Now, this is a slightly different issue, but my main interest is on health and social care. And that's what I'm writing about. Now, I attended a seminar in Italy just a few years ago on this, which had been a Six Nations seminar with Sweden, the UK, Netherlands, as I recall, and Italy. And the Italian professor presenting this, the outcomes of this research said, it's clear from these findings, it's only you northern Protestant countries that have difficulties in facing the arrangements for care, because we southern Catholic countries rely still on the family. So I couldn't resist this, of course, and I asked him, when you say family, do you mean women? To which he shrugged and said, well, of course. And the reality is 83% of the care workforce, certainly in OECD countries, are all women. And they also carry major responsibilities, many of them, at home and in their personal lives as well. So it's a question of whether or not that kind of gender issue, which deals, I think, as much with the ethics of care and that kind of body of thought, as with the ethics of justice, can be brought in a bit more. I raise this in part because I read all these difficult reports, some of which I used to write, in the UK, and I get concerned about the government response now, particularly the government response in mid-staffs, which I got a very good report in many ways, but the response said the difficulty is that our workforce is not sufficiently compassionate. And we either need to, and I thought, what do you mean, sack 1.5 million people and find another 1.5 million people who are more compassionate, or are you going to train them to become compassionate? I just don't see it that way. I think people are compassionate Monday morning, and if they're not compassionate by Tuesday afternoon, then it's to the leadership and management that we must look, not to their basic humanity. And I just wondered whether you had a response.
Well, that's a huge question, of course. Part of the problem, especially about the elderly, is that we don't value the elderly anymore. This is young culture, whereas in the pre-modern societies, age was prized and for its wisdom, etc. Now, it is. I was in. Someone from Saudi Arabia once was objecting to me about people, about all the complaints that people make about Saudi Arabia. And he said, but when I was in the UK, I saw something very disturbing. You have all these prisons for old people. Yes. And I started saying, well, of course, they're not exactly prisons, but then I thought of it, and in a sense they are. A sort of rubbish dump where people are put and stuck in front of televisions and gaze at them in a stupor of, there is the thing is on youth, vigour, and we've got now this increasing problem of an aging population. I'm getting up there myself, so it's beginning to hit home now. So there are basic attitude problems, target-driven things, not enough money being put into this, or not enough imagination. It's a huge topic, but it depends again on just the fact that if people are no longer functional in our capitalist economy, if they're not producing anymore, then they're of no concern, not really. This is, and I agree with you about the women. I've been in that position myself, especially as a single woman. I sort of pointed to my own mother's last years, and that because I was single and didn't have any responsibilities, therefore, I could take on and I did take it on, and it wasn't easy. But there was a resentment in me when, because I had a few other things to do, and let alone sort of going on huge lecture tours to enable her to have some care at home, so she could stay at home with somebody living with her. There is this problem, and I haven't got an answer for it. And about the human rights, people were complaining that Muslims don't value human rights, but often human rights, which is something I said came up at dinner afterwards. That I said, well, of course, Western countries have not always been very consistent in their support they give to rulers who are not providing their people with basic human rights that we would demand for ourselves. And that has, or we to close our eyes to major injustices, political injustices of the world, and don't worry about the people whose human rights are being violated in such circumstances. And that has vitiated the whole ideal for a lot of many people in the Muslim world. So I have no answer for that, but just that it is something that we have to grapple with, that each human being has absolute sacred value. We're living too long, I think. Immortality has now become, we don't necessarily believe that we're going up there to the Elysian fields. So we want to stay as long as possible, and all this thing about jogging and, I sometimes think, I look at the prospect of old age makes me want to sort of take up smoking again. But then I was told that it was too late. I probably wouldn't get rid of myself early enough. So I have no answer for that, but this is one of the problems that goes deep down into our attitudes as a society. It should give us pause when we congratulate ourselves on our superiority as a culture, and should remain that little bit of sand and the discomfort that should puncture our sense of complacency that you often get with people, especially when they talk about other parts of the world in a disparaging way. But thank you for that good question.
I think Simon, I saw he's been inching up.
Yes, I do have a question, Karen. I'm Simon Chater, and I direct a company called Green Inc., which provides communication services. My question to you is, in your talk, you stressed compassionate action rather than compassionate feeling. But my question to you is, how can we know what it is right to do? Because you mentioned the UK's previous involvement in the Middle East, for example. And of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we can look at something like the Sykes-Picot line and say, well, they got it hopelessly wrong. They had the wrong criteria. But by the standards of the time, by the morality of the time, they probably thought they were doing the right thing. So how can we know what it is right to do?
Well, this is the question of the whole of life, isn't it? I mean, this is what we're always asking ourselves. It's not supposed to be easy. It's not just an automatic thing. And sometimes you have not to do, but refrain from doing. That's why I like both versions of the Golden Rule, do unto others and don't do unto others. Sometimes to hold yourself back. And the thing is, as Confucius was very good about this. He's one of my heroes. I keep bringing him up, I know, but he's so kind of practical. And he said, this is not just a blanket thing, that you've got some kind of principle that you come storming in with. You've got to take into account all the circumstances and all the people involved in a decision. And this is extraordinarily difficult. And we have to ask ourselves, is self-interest a major part of our thinking? And I would say, with Sykes-Picot, I'm sure, especially in this age when we seemed to be ruling the globe and had and our industrial revolution had suddenly transformed our own society in extraordinary ways. And there was probably a missionary zeal to spread this. But there was also, I mean, the whole business about the colonial power was to sort of make them part of our trade network, basically. And yes, we bought railways and things, but it was really only to link one colonial outpost with another, really. And was there really enough thought for the people who were being put together in these new nation states? But of course, in that we felt so omnipotent at that stage, we didn't realise that this would come back to haunt us. This is the Buddhist karma thing. You sow deeds, and then they come back. So no, it's not easy. And, you know, I like this idea of the bracelet a lot. But I'm, you know, just rushing out and doing a compassionate act is, you know, it's fraught with problems somehow. So people don't always want to be helped across the road, or, you know, as an old lady, you know, or some... and so really put yourself deeply in that other person's shoes, or other culture's shoes. Learn about them. Learn about their fears and their traditions. Not done enough, really, with Sykes-Picot, though it has been suggested cynically that they created these states to be unstable by putting all these incompatible people in the same place and drawing a line around. The nation-state was a modern invention, and it has not been an exactly ironic institution, though it really helped our industrial process. And for it has had huge problems. This is the year of World War I we're celebrating now. There's some horror of nationalism gone, resulting in the collective suicide of Europe. World War I has been called. So let's keep... I think you raised such an important point, though, because it's not just easy, you know, a question of rushing out and doing some... It requires deep thought, complicated thought, anguished thought, and taking into account all the circumstances, all the people involved, and trying to work, and you're trying just not to do harm, perhaps, rather than do good. I like the Sanskrit ahimsa, harmlessness, don't do harm. One of the principles of the medical profession, don't do harm. And we do harm often so carelessly. That's why I remember sometimes when you're turning that bracelet over, what did I not do today? What did I refrain from doing? Making that ugly remark about a colleague or a country with whom we're at war, or a religious tradition. Just what did I not do? How did I pull myself back from that uncompassionate act? That the odd unkind word, unkind remark we can forget about it, but it can stay in somebody's heart and fester for a lifetime. And so beware of that, I think. And some of the, say, Sykes-Picot, it's been festering. Though, and it's not for us to keep pointing fingers at these people. You know, it'll be from a self-righteous way, because we are committing really awful acts right now too. But just to bear that in mind, that whatever it was, there were serious flaws in this. And that is what we have to take responsibility for as we deal with the world today.
I think there was Don back there.
Thank you. I'm Don De Silva from Initiatives of Change. We do apologize for being in a place which is difficult to find. Please have compassion for us. And we will make sure that the sign or the number is even widened outside.
Yes, and there was a lady who was clearly on some kind of drug, sitting on a doorstep, who kept telling me, they've all gone to the zoo. It was a nightmare scenario.
I'd like to ask you something about the whole, because you are deep into spiritual traditions about that and movements, world movements in many ways, because my background also is with the environmental movement. And when you look at the movements, of course, several movements have done things, wonders, to make a difference in the world. At the same time, sometimes when movements get created, they become suddenly some people's movements. And the challenge is in sustaining the integrity of the objectives, the aims, the calling, the commitment, as well as sustaining the commitment of individuals in different parts of the world as you grow. Have you given thought to seeing how it is possible to sustain that commitment, sustain the quality of the commitment, as well as enable people to work together?
I think this is something that we were talking about. It was something that Amin brought up. To look, at the moment, we're just struggling to get going. But to look down and create strategies, this is something we have to do, for where, and just look ahead and see the kind of disorders that do crop up in such movements, and have in place a set of strategic solutions that will enable us at least to begin to deal with them as they come up, and to be, I think we need constant self-examination on this. Now, people have often said, well, you know, this could be used for great harm, but so can anything, frankly. You know, none of us would ever do anything if we thought we're afraid of what might come down the line. But we have constantly, again, to be examining ourselves, our motives, our behaviour, and always try to go deeper and not be... but this is something we have in mind. And I think is something we should definitely bring up when we meet again in March, to have, so that we really deal with it this time. We had so much other stuff to do about setting up a financial system that we didn't really get to that point. But I think we'll put it on the agenda, top of the agenda in our meeting in March. Thank you for that very good question and caveat.
Anina, you were next.